Welcome, everybody. Today we're here to talk about starting with where you're at before immediately diving into your development, or developing others for that matter. And with me today to talk about this important and fun topic is Sara Bridges, CEO, psychologist, head of Bridges Consulting. Welcome, Sara. Thank you for being here today.
It is great to be here. I'm excited to talk to you.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, I'd love to start with tell us a little bit about your career story and how you kind of got into ultimately what you're doing today.
Well, like so many executives that I work with, I had no plan to go into organizational consulting. I didn't even know it was a thing. But I did have a little nature nurture in that I was raised by psychologist parents of the therapy variety. And so ended up going into grad school for neuropsychology. I was thinking I'd go the research route. Decided I'm not good alone doing research. I'm much more extroverted. And so when I was done with my doctorate, I ended up joining PDI, which is Korn Ferry now, and working with a bunch of organizational psychologists and really learning the trade of doing assessment and coaching and teamwork. And I did that for years. And then 25 years ago, founded my own company, which is Bridges Consulting, and work with a great team and do many of the same things, but at larger scale.
Yeah, nice. I can't believe and maybe we did cover this one time when we chatted, but that we both got our start at PDI.
I know.
And Korn Ferry,
yeah.
So that's interesting. It's not intentional that I keep having former PDIers and Korn Ferry consultants on. It's just how pervasive these companies are.
Or it's the similarity bias. We do tend to like people we have something in common with.
Yeah, I like it. Well, so what we wanted to talk about today was, and I love how you were putting this earlier, is just like, how do we make sure that we're starting with where we're at or where the person is at, whether or not we're talking about the we being coaches and coaching leaders or leaders who are coaching their employees. So I would, tell me a little bit about why that keeps coming up for you as an important area to remember to focus on.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly wasn't a brainstorm I had coming out of the delivery room. This is something really out of experience. And it was that one thing I noticed after a few years of coaching, we tend to be pretty good at setting goals for ourselves, for others. I know there's lots of research on how you do it, everything else, but people get it. You want to set something you're shooting towards. What I learned in doing coaching, especially when I had stakeholders involved, is we'd be working towards that goal. A person might really be making good progress. They'd think they were there, and the boss thinks they haven't even gotten out of the gate. I call it the difference between starting line and finish line as your metric. When you look at how far I've come, I've gotten 30% better. Well, if boss is thinking you should be at 95% and you're now at the 40th percentile, you're going to be far apart. And part of this comes from we don't spend enough time really talking about what is the starting point. Where are you right now relative to what I need you to be doing in these goals? And I think there's a lot of reasons. It's uncomfortable. We humans don't like, especially Midwesterners, the conflict feelings. And so it's a lot easier to talk about the future and to talk about something that's amorphous and not personal. But the problem is it would be like one person starting from California and one from Tennessee. And why didn't we get to New York at the same time? We didn't calibrate on where, when we were starting. So that's where it came from. Yeah. And that's my interest in any kind of coaching, in really doing some robust discovery in the first month with 360 data, of course, self-report, least valid, but interesting. And then also some personality tests so we can triangulate all of that and really get a picture of where are you right now.
Yeah. Okay. I'm going to pick your brain on a topic around this because I think you're right. This is really important. One observation I have from also just doing assessments on the front end, right? And even doing sort of big, robust assessment center kind of assessments where we're doing business simulations, cognitives, personality tests. So this is going to be a slight segue, but I have a feeling you've got an opinion on this. I have found when we sit down then to talk about development, and even today, as I'm starting with kind of post-program coaching with some folks, is when we're like, all right, well, let's talk about what to focus on. I feel like coming out of assessments, it's
Mm-hmm.
really easy for leaders, almost too easy for leaders to say, well, let's focus on whatever the worst scores were coming out of the assessment, right? And I feel like I find myself often saying, let's take a step back. That might be worth chasing down, but let's take a step back and really think about your current context and where you want to go and what feedback you're getting on the ground. So would be curious, because I love doing assessments. They can be really helpful for awareness building, but how are you helping kind of bridge people between the assessment data as well as their sort of real life data and experience and
I mean,
goals?
it's such a great point, and I've done coaching long enough to watch the whole swing from a total negativity bias, which all of us have in our craniums, to focus
Yeah.
on what's bad. And in fact, when I started
Mm-hmm.
coaching one place, it was called Coaching for Consequences, and they couldn't figure out why nobody signed up. Okay, that made me popular when I was in the lunchroom. Um, and then
Yeah.
I feel like it swung very far the other way. All you need to do is focus on your strengths. Well, if there's a
Mm-hmm.
big derailing behavior or something really underdeveloped that's germane to what your success is based on, that's not going to get you there either. So I am with you. I do not
Yeah.
like it if it's, and we all do it. It is negativity bias. So I'm low on
Yeah.
these three. We need to look at the context. Are they really critical? Are they important? If they are, my belief when it's not as natural, get it up to neutral. We don't want it to be something that's distracting. We don't want it to be something that's a hot topic and 360. Nobody expects you to be an A
Right.
plus player at everything. So it'll be disproportionate what you get out of leveraging those strengths more broadly. But you need to also be aware if there's something getting in the way.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So kind of coming back to the theme here of like starting with where people are, right? Because I think it can be, I'll just pick on the question I was just asking, right? It'd be really easy to say, okay, I need to get better at influence. Let's dive in. So when someone is coming to you with that, with at least what they think is an initial picture of what they need to be working on, how are you working to sort of recalibrate, take that step back, really assess where they're at before starting to move forward?
Well, always with coaching, there is a robust verbal 360. They pick the people, I interview them, get feedback. That tells us a lot on what's showing up now. It's always a combo of how you're showing up with how the culture expects you to show up. So it's not as simple
Mm-hmm.
as this is just me, but you're in this culture. So that's what matters. I think the testing is also helpful because use influence. I have
Mm-hmm.
had people say, I have a huge problem with influence. I look at the personality testing and it really looks like it's an issue around confidence or it's an issue around
Mm-hmm.
being quite introverted. Um, you might think that sounds like semantic differences, but it's not. They have different approaches that would be useful in addressing any of them. And the other thing I'd say is sometimes people, it's almost like I need a personality transplant to become extroverted and influencing. I work with people to say there's typically a couple of key areas that are going to have a big impact. When is influence really going to stand out if we agree that is the thing? It may be when you're in certain leadership meetings. It may be at certain times when you're speaking. It's not 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a relief too to say this is behaviors in certain contexts. This isn't about changing who you are.
I love that. I don't want to. I've had at least a couple of people that I've been coaching who have said like, I'm being told I'm too quiet in certain meetings, right? And so I've had to sort of walk through well, let's take a step back and start with, do you agree
Mm-hmm.
with that? And do you have a sense of why, right? And where that conversation can go. And to your point, is this starting to go down a road of confidence or just introversion or, various aspects that then that kind of unlocks, all right, where are we going to go with this? How can I help you, you know, get to the bottom of and solve this.
And I'll just jump in.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sometimes also it's kind of like people going to a physician and saying, I have X and it really is Y. The symptom looks the same. I mean, something similar happens, and I'll give you an example. I'm coaching someone right this minute who got a lot of feedback. You don't address issues of performance on your team. Okay, fair enough. That was the perception. As we really dug through and even looked at his testing, what it really is, first of all, he's very methodical, but second of all, he doesn't communicate what he is doing. I'm not talking broadcast who's having a problem at work, but with his peers to say, I see this, here are things I'm doing. So the bigger thing for him is a communication issue, to be proactive and transparent, showing his work. I always say if you don't show it, they don't know it. And there's got to be ways you can transmit some of the things you're doing.
Yeah, like in that case, it's not everybody's business what you're specifically doing, but what are how do you help paint the picture that you are working
that you
on,
are working on it. You can certainly say that, or yes, here's the approach I'm taking.
Yeah. Love it. So how else are you, I would love to hear some other examples of like, how else are you, as we think about, and I would love for you to share how you put it earlier as you're thinking about, does this person even know what they want to develop? How are you kind of starting at a baseline of understanding where is this person at today?
So after we get the 360 data, we get the testing data, we have boss and HR giving input, and of course the person giving input, we have a pretty clear picture of where they're starting. And where there's a misalignment, someone thinks they're great at it, other people are saying no. It could be back to that example I gave, I'm not showing what I'm doing. So legitimately I am doing it. But often that is the most powerful moment, especially with the stakeholders, to figure out why are we misaligned, not on the goal, but on where we are. And I feel like some of the best part of coaching happens right there, to really dig into that, get people get synced on what the thing really is, and then move forward.
Yeah. One thing that I have found, especially, there's a lot of really good, well-intentioned, well-designed leadership development programming out there. And I think one thing this is where I think when coaching is done well, it nails this part for sure. But I think where a lot of learning programs, if not intentional, fall short is around getting people to actually experiment and do something different on the job, right? I think that's where I think a lot of coaching can, that's where it might have an advantage over broader sort of leadership development programming. So I would love to hear your thoughts on just getting people beyond consuming knowledge, which is really easy, reading a book or attending a program.
It's so true. And I always say, if insight was all we needed, nobody would have high blood pressure. We'd all be in great shape. Everybody would be terrific at work and perfect parents. It is a necessary, but largely not sufficient thing to do. And that's Kevin Willie, who I know you had, saying part of coachability is not just, yes, I smile and take it well. What am I doing with it? And to me, that really is the magic in coaching. And in many ways, I think it's that and I do leadership development programs, it's often so amorphous again. What am I doing? I'm going to try to be more influential or give more feedback to my team. In coaching, we get nitty-gritty. Where will you get the highest payoff for doing that? Who are you going to do it with? How are you going to do it? Let's role play doing it. Send me a text after you've done it, or give me a call if it doesn't go well. That kind of hands-on, really working with people to get specific, because it's building behaviors first. It's not acquiring a new trait. And I think that is what makes coaching so useful.
Yeah. I also think, I might be wheeling us back towards the sort of beginning of the process, so to speak, is those alignment conversations with, at the very least, the person's direct manager, right? If not, like, in an ideal world, you probably would also have their HR business partner there and or talent manager there who's also supporting that leader's growth. But I think there's also that I know I'm kind of wheeling us back a bit, but that important conversation of, regardless of even the assessment data, even just deciding what's important to work on, is getting that alignment with the leader to say, well, here's what maybe in our first coaching session or two we've come up with to say, this is what the leader believes, the person you're coaching believes to be the most important things to be working on and why, and to take that into a conversation for even just an alignment on what's important to be working on. Because I think, kind of going back to, I was picking on assessments earlier, and as you were saying, negativity bias, I think that's yet another fail-safe in the process for, are we working on the truly highest leverage items that even this person's supervisor believes is going to either unlock more performance or outcomes or career outcomes even.
That is absolutely it. As much as I love therapy and one-on-one coaching out of the context of the organization, the problem is we humans, me, you, all of us, we're not the best and most reliable narrators. And it's not because we're trying to lie, it's because we have biases in how we see ourselves. And so I believe it's really just mandatory that there's some feedback coming in and that you have things like the boss saying this is most important, because I have had people think it's really critical I do X. Boss doesn't care about that. That is not the way to get into promotion. And often one of the most important parts of the conversation is what should you stop doing, which I don't think we talk enough about. It's like we carry everything to every level. And what we really need to do is get concrete around what we need to shed, because that gives us capacity.
Yeah. That's such a great point. I feel like I talk to leaders at almost every level about this. It just takes on a different flavor of like the specifics at each level with the exact point of what do you stop doing, right? Because it's challenging, especially, it all comes back to the leadership pipeline, right? The tome I think we all love from Sharon Trotter and Noel of, each transition, you have to shed that
That's
old
right.
role title, what you felt, what plus what equaled success at that role, what you might even have to let go of things you were good at and loved to do. And it's such a trap that leaders fall into, if not intentional, of sort of regularly rolling up their sleeves and operating down a level because they're just so used to and comfortable with that. I'd love to hear your perspective on how you've seen that take shape, right? Because I think you were shaking your head yes, saying too, like, it's a challenge at it shows up at every level. It's just the specifics of what we're talking about change a bit.
It shows up at every level because it's a human trait to be acquisitive, to take things on, but not shed them. And part of that is loss aversion, which again is, something where we have an equally weighed, something we gain or something we lose, we will always feel worse about the loss. And that's something that we evolved to feel. It's something that helps society and humans succeed. But it can cause real problems, and you nailed it, especially when it's something that has served me. And this is where we need to be nuanced about the strength data too, because we can feel like I've always been great at X. It can be really hard to let that go. And it reminds me of Hemingway talked about writing, you need to kill your darlings. Well, we all have a lot of darlings we need to knock off, to be able to move forward. And I think that's hard and a block. And I think, secondly, our brains love things that are familiar because that's translated just subconsciously as safe. Something new, big role, especially when, God forbid, someone says, be strategic. I can just see my client's cortisol go up. The problem is it's not clear what it means to be strategic. So guess what? Your brain sending out threat messages saying, don't do it. And what do? We turn back to what's familiar. So it's got to be, and this is again for coaching or even a good leadership program, helping people really walk through and instantiate what that's going to mean.
Yeah. It's so funny. some of the simple tools that can help people with that, right? It's some really simple, and I'd love to hear what kind of how you help people work through that. But I know for me, there's just some really simple paper and pencil kind of activities you can do around having people kind of write down how they're spending their time or track how they're spending
Hmm.
their time, or even ideate to begin with. How would you ideally like to be spending your time? Let's forget about how you're spending your time today. How else do you help leaders work through kind of uncovering, where and how they need to start letting things go?
Well, I definitely go the route you just talked about, sometimes just to get a baseline. And again, self-report is terrible. I mean, 95% of people think they're in the top half of drivers. Most men rate themselves as above average. Doesn't work statistically. You get into problems with that. So what we
Yeah.
do, I will look at their calendars. But I also ask them to do what I think people do when they're doing food diaries, which is not just have the plan, but write down anything that gets added, the Snickers bar that comes in. And the Snickers bar, those little meetings, oh, it's just 15 minutes, or I just went down a rabbit hole on. We need to really get a grasp of what they're spending time on.
Hmm.
One of my mentors taught me a long time ago there are never resource problems. They're just priority problems. And
Hmm.
that really sticks with me. If you skinny it down, you always have enough. Now you can say that's really hard, that's people, all true. But it's not a resource problem. And I challenge people to think and I need to manage time better. It's not a time problem. We need to look at what you're cramming in. We all have the same hours. And that can be really eye-opening and helpful and lead to things like delegation and so on.
Yeah. I, I chuckled a little, maybe not audibly, and I know it's not going to be that helpful of a quote, but for a while it was popular to say, we all have the same amount of time in the day as Beyonce has. Now,
It makes
that
us
doesn't
feel
mean
bad
that
now.
that doesn't mean we all have the same support structure that she might have. But I think that's a really good point, right? And I know in my own coaching practice, it's really simple but eye-opening activities sometimes
Oh,
when when you're just reviewing how did you spend your time, right? Like the food diary idea is a great idea too. I don't, is make sure you're also writing down the do you gotta minutes that you said yes to, right, throughout the
oh,
day.
which in my experience is a huge chunk of what's happening.
Yeah.
Just an impromptu, and there goes the day. And even when they've blocked time for strategic thinking, they haven't thought through what that means. So it's this big yawning gap. So
Yeah.
someone asks for a meeting and they schedule over it.
Yeah. 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 Or you end up sinking that time on some other less value added thing than you intended to. And suddenly now I'm replying to emails that probably don't need to be replied to
Probably
either,
not
right? So it's how are
critical.
you holding, yeah, how are you holding yourself accountable to using that time the way you intend? Well, before I give us a big shove into our advice section, I just, was there, what else around this topic kind of has you, I don't know, keeps you up at night or gets you excited to dig in with coaches or people you're coaching?
This is not directly tied to alignment, but another area I'm really interested in is environment and the effect that has on people.
Mm,
Environment, maybe the people, it may be physical things, the sunlight, the distance to things. Um, it's easy to think about with things like trying to change food habits. I mean, if you
yeah,
want to stop eating sugar, take it out of your house. You are not going to get in the car and drive to 7-Eleven. I mean, odds are very low you will do that, but if it's in the pantry, you'll grab it. And
right.
so, how can we think about that at work as well? And simple things, turning off devices, that is in the realm of don't have sugar in your pantry.
Yeah,
Thinking about times I won't be interrupted versus I'm going to try to resist the interruptions. But really being thoughtful about that, the people around us, being the social creatures we are, have a huge, huge impact on us, and being thoughtful about who are the inputs. And are they raising up my game or kind of pulling me into things that aren't so great? Am I getting a diversity? of perspectives. And by that, I even mean people in different functional areas,
Mm.
for creativity and innovation, but really thinking through those pieces.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought that up, right? And I think I love the, starting with the example of, I'm trying to snack less. Well, let's get the snacks out of your house, right? Uh, I like that. So I think it's all about bringing intentionality. So I would love to hear, what are some of the more kind of common environmental cues that you find yourself coaching people around?
One is definitely technology, that people say they're going to do deep thinking or work on a project, but they keep their phone turned on, they keep email beeping. I know that's simple, but first of all, it's ridiculous. Even if you do avoid it, you're degrading your concentration horribly and your attention. There's a switching cost. So that would be a big one.
Yeah.
The piece of doing things first that require a lot of hard thinking, that's something most people know, most people
Mhm.
don't do. Really thinking through physically where they're going to be for some of the deeper thinking project work. And
Yeah.
I have a number of executives who will come in maybe at 10 o'clock instead of 8 and go somewhere. I mean, literally, I have one who goes to a library. Nobody's going to
Mm.
bug him there. It's totally
Right.
quiet and just gets it done and then can be present when he comes in. But really thinking through those kinds of pieces.
Yeah, I like that. I've heard, the innovative thinking part, that just makes me think of, I have heard people talking about, like, we need to get away from our usual conference rooms or our usual desks, like even with collaborative, innovative, creative time. It's like, let's go sit in a different conference room in a different part of the building, or, you know, different building, and, the library. Love that idea.
No, and even bonus points, get outside and walk if you can, or even walk in the building. I mean, it's fascinating to look at brain scans before and after a 15-minute walk. The amount of
Yeah.
oxygen and blood flow, you can't miss the difference. And so,
Yeah.
talking with someone while you're both walking can be really powerful also on those.
Yeah, yeah. And if you struggle with that, get a puppy,
You
and you
will,
will
you'll go.
have to walk. Yeah.
It's actually, that is
um,
one of the best parts with dogs.
yeah, yeah. Well, and I think, a really good point you're making too here is the devices, right? We have, you know, I've got two devices right next to me that could bug me at any moment, right? So even for this pot, now I have to do it for certain reasons because of like computer RAM and
Mm-hmm.
all that too, just to maximize that. So it's like, even before I start a podcast, I close everything down on my
Yep.
computer with the exception of this program. Um, but even, it's gotten worse and worse over the years, but I still remember getting good feedback during, either it was possibly my first time as a leader, which was like, hey, when you have a one-on-one with someone, like, I don't think we even had airplane mode at that time on phones, but essentially, like, put your phone on airplane mode and, like, lock your computer, if not shut your laptop, and, turn towards this person and give them your full attention. Right. And I think that's sort of what you reminded me of was, and I'll aim it in this way, which is like, how are you giving your attention to what actually matters the most? Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that. Well,
And I mean, another mentor I have talks about the secret to happiness is where you point your attention.
mm,
And I think it's the secret to so many things, health, relationships, happiness, productivity, but we just fritter it away. And I do
yeah.
too. So I'm not above everybody
Yeah.
I'm talking to. We need to be really mindful. And this is back to the environment, shutting off the devices, sometimes getting into a different room, going for a walk, because you're not going to be able to control it.
Yeah.
It's a reward system that's been activated by these devices. Not going to happen.
Yeah, I feel like we learn more and more about the importance of presence, right? And so I'll
Mm-hmm.
give you a quick quote, and then we'll get into the advice section too, which is, I think I heard recently, it was like, the opposite of anxious is not anxious. It's actually the opposite of anxious is presence, right? The opposite of anxiety
Oh, that's
is
really
being present,
nice.
which I thought was interesting as well. So
That's really
I'm going to
nice.
give us a violent shove into our what I like to call the advice column of the video audio format. So every week I ask folks to prepare some advice. So I'll start with what's your key advice for leaders out there?
And I think it really circles back to what we talked about, that before embarking for myself on any kind of development or a team member, really spend the time to honestly, candidly, thoroughly establish where we are right now. If you're setting a goal, where am I relative to that? And not just remember, not just self-report on that.
Mm.
And we can really help our people by doing that so they have a clear picture. Secondly, when we want to coach someone else, let's say, let's be careful about not diving into coaching before we've diagnosed why this is happening. Is this truly a motivational problem? Is it a skill gap? Is this something to do with someone's just not self-aware? Those have really different solutions. And we just missed the mark. There's a huge amount of wasted effort and frustration around that.
Mm.
So taking the time to figure that out. And then third, just whether for me or for you or anybody, when we want clear alignment, we can't be the only point of contact. So formally, informally getting some feedback from others who will be honest, and then doing some testing.
Yeah. The one thing that your advice made me think of too is the power of sharing what you're working on with someone else, and how that also kind of adds accountability to the picture too, right? So I think not only aligning with your leader perhaps or a peer on what your goal is and where you're at today, not only does that help you judge what's the gap really, but I think, probably also adds that bit of accountability too, by having kind of gone public with someone on what you're working on.
I love that. And that's always a piece in
Yeah.
coaching I do. And I'll tell
Yeah.
you, here's the other reason that's in it for the coaching client. One of the troubles they face, this, is confirmation bias. They can really shift and people are still seeing the old behavior. And to tell people, please look for, essentially, this is something I'm really focused on, can help speed up that process.
Love it. Love it. All right. Really quick, a short piece of advice for HR, those who support leaders.
I would say supporting leaders, from my standpoint as a coach, be involved in all coaching programs, be involved in the leadership development. I really view you as the internal coach, me as the external coach.
Mm.
And so our philosophy is just the more they can be involved with us, the better. And
Nice.
please advocate.
Yeah. Love it. Cool. All right. So our last section is sort of if people want more Sara Bridges in their life, how can they find you, get a hold of you? What else would you want them to know about you and what you're doing?
So you can always get a hold of me. My name's Sara at sarabridges.com. And I would say a new thing that we're doing that's fun is twice a year, a retreat at the farm that I have in Lakeville, Minnesota. We do have people who fly in for it. It's 1 day live and then a year of monthly coaching. And it's really looking at our lives holistically to be intentional about the next 3 to 5 years.
Very cool. And registration is open now until when?
It is open now, and the retreat is in September. So just reach out if you are interested.
Awesome. So we'll definitely have this out in time for people to kind of catch that news and register if they're interested. Sara, this was a very fun conversation, kind of talking about some of the mechanics of coaching, which I really appreciated. Had a great time myself. Just thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, thank you for having me. I always love talking shop with another in the field.
All right. Thanks.